Good morning, kindergarten. Today we are going to be reading a book called Harlem's Little Blackbird. And this story is about a woman named Florence Mills. And we are going to be learning all about her. So let's just begin. Front cover, back cover, spine. Touch your back. Touch your spine, open your mind, hands in your lap, it's story time. Now, the author of this book is Renee Watson. The author writes the words, the author writes the words. Hi-ho, a cheerio, the author writes the words. And the illustrator of our book is Christian Robinson. The illustrator draws the picture. The illustrator draws the picture. Hi-ho, a cheerio. The illustrator draws the pictures. Harlem's Little Blackbird. So beautiful. They called her Harlem's Little Blackbird. Her name was Florence Mills. She was born in 1896 and lived in a teeny tiny itsy bitsy house in Washington, D.C. A house so fragile, which means it could break really easily. It would shake whenever a thunderstorm would come. Mother said, "Don't fear," and she would sway back and forth to the rain's rhythm, singing the same spirituals that had carried her family through slavery storms. Very important to note that. So here's her song. When peace like a river underneath my way, when sorrows like sea barrels roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me say, it is well with my soul. So here's her house and the thunderstorm. It's making it move because it's so fragile. Mother's voice wrapped Florence like a warm blanket. Florence started singing too. The louder the thunder roared, the stronger she sang. Soon the storm faded to a damp drizzle, and the drizzle disappeared. Her voice had chased the storm away. Florence thought, if my voice is powerful enough to stop the rain, what else can it do? Here's Florence and her mom singing. Really beautiful, right? They sing so nicely it stopped the rain. It wasn't long before Florence found out. On the playground at school, she would sing and dance. Her friends would stop playing just to listen. Whenever music would play, Florence's hands got waving, her hips got shaking, and her feet studied and glided across the pavement. The cakewalk is exactly what they called it. Everyone was cakewalking, but Florence did it best, and cakewalking is a type of dance. Her feet were like wings fluttering in the air. Soon, Florence was cakewalking and singing in all contests over town. She won many medals. Right here she is doing an amazing job right over here. Sorry, kindergarten, I'm pointing in not a clear way. Here she is, right, doing an amazing job cakewalking and dancing, and here are all of her friends singing and dancing with her, and some musicians up there. Florence had a hard time paying attention in school. Instead of listening to the teacher, she would stare out the window. The sky became her stage, and she was star singing for the world. But wishing she couldn't change the fact she wasn't living, Florence Mills, the daughter of former slaves living in a teeny itsy bitsy house. So, right, she had all these talents, but she wanted more, right? And she felt really bad because of her past. But should she feel ashamed from her past? No, right? She should take pride in her past, right? She's very strong and resilient. Word danced around Washington about the little girl with big talent. Florence was invited to perform in a fancy theater. The night before the show, she practiced her routine over and over and over. On the day of the show, when Florence and her friends arrived at the theater, nothing what was Florence had dreamed it to be. "They can't come in," the manager said. He pointed to the sign that read, "Whites only." "No, black people are allowed in the audience." Florence used her voice to stand up for what was right. Right? She didn't want to sing without all of her friends and family there. "If they can't go in, I'm staying out here," she said. And with her hands on her hips and her head held high, she walked away. "Wait," said the manager, but Florence kept walking. He begged her to perform and snuck her friends in to see the show. That night, Florence performed her best routine. Everyone stood up and clapped, right? And that's because Florence said what she knew was right? She said, "I won't perform without my friends and family who look like me here." Very brave of her. Less than 6 years later, her family moved to New York City. Florence and her sisters became singing and dancing trio, the Mill Sisters. They performed at Harmon's Lincoln Theater. In the summer, the Mill Sisters spent their days at Coney Island. Florence never got tired of going on the rides and playing the games at the arcades, but nothing was fun as performing at the Surf Venue Avenue Opera House. Reporters followed them everywhere, and "Come here, the woman who sings like a bird, when she dances as if she's flying." And she was. So she performed with her sisters, right? And people even compared her dancing to a bird. Wow. She flew from stage to stage all over the country, in the East Coast to the West Coast, until she landed New York City 63rd Music Hall. It was 1921, and Florence won a role in Shuffle Along. The sold-out show introduced jazz to white audiences. Each night, Florence gave her best. Every part of her body danced. Her eyelashes fluttered, her fingers wiggled, she whirled around and boogied down. Night after night, she gave the audience a hand-clapping, foot-stomping good time. So here is her doing her beautiful dance, flying. So amazing of her. A very special thing was happening in Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance. All kinds of creative minds contributed to the Harlem's cultural movement. Langston Hughes penned poetry, Duke Ellington composed jazz classics, and in play after play, Florence continued to mesmerize crowds. And from Dover Street to Dixie, she was so good that the cast was invited to London. Florence was excited to travel overseas, right? And so you can see all of the amazing people that they were just talking about doing all of their creative talents, right? If you notice something that's very important was the skin color that they all had, right? They don't look like Miss Bear, right? They're all these amazing, creative black people. But not everyone welcomed her. When she boarded the ship, the white passengers refused to eat in the same dining hall as Florence and her troupe. So mean. And when she arrived in London, many people threatened to boycott the show because they didn't want to see a black performer on their stage. On opening night, Florence took a deep breath, opened her mouth, and sang one note, then another and another. And she amazed the audience with her talents. Right? Even though they were so rude to her, right? She rose above it. She was resilient. Each night when Florence stepped on stage, the audience cheered, and before she opened her mouth, she was an international star. That means a star all over the world. And Florence thought, if my voice can take me around the world, what else can it do? After Florence sailed back to Harlem, Mr. Zingfield, an important Broadway manager, offered Florence a leading role. She would have been the first black woman to star in Ziegfeld Follies. It was every performer's dream, but she turned it down. Now, why do you think she turned it down, kindergarten? Let's think about that for a minute. We're making a prediction. Yeah, you can tell me. Instead, she chose to use her voice in shows that gave unknown black singers and actors a chance to perform on stage. Florence became the leading lady in Dixie to Broadway. 100 lights shined on the Meccan, flashing her name. The daughter of former slaves who grew into a teeny tiny itsy bitsy house had made it. Florence wanted to use her voice for more than entertainment. And entertainment means more than just singing, right? More than just being a star. She wanted to help other people the same way that she grew. In the show Blackbird, she sang, "I'm a little blackbird looking for a bluebird." It became her favorite song to perform, a cry for equal rights. Though I'm a darker hue, I've had a heart the same as you. For love I'm dying, my heart is crying. A wise old owl said, keep on trying. I am a little blackbird, looking for a bluebird too. Here's her singing, and those were the words of her famous song. The show was such a hit that Florence was invited to London again. This time, she was welcomed by photographers and news reporters, and she was invited to many parties, right? She was very famous. Everyone wanted to get to know her, regardless, at that point, of the color of skin she was. After her performances, Florence disguised herself so no one would recognize her. She went to hospitals to deliver flowers to patients, and she walked around the Thames River giving food to beggars. Wow, she's very nice. Florence kept giving and dancing and singing until she was too exhausted to perform anymore. She became very ill and returned to Harlem to receive treatment from her doctors, but there was not much her doctors could do. On November 1st, 1927, Florence's song came to an end, right? So here's her doing kind acts, all these kind acts. More than 150,000 mourners flooded the streets of Harlem to say goodbye. Letters, telegrams, and flowers were sent to the family from all over the world. A lot of people who had little, politicians, entertainers, whites, blacks, gave their tribute, which means their love, to Florence Mills. Even the Blackbirds came. Hundreds of them were hovering nearby. So here's all the people, right, when Florence passed away, who were coming to say goodbye to her. Florence's dream lives on in the singers and dancers who came after her. It lives in the heart of every boy and girl and person from a teeny tiny itsy bitsy place who dreams of doing great, big, enormous things. So in this story, right, we notice that Florence was not only famous, right, but she also did kind things for people, right? She gave flowers to the people in the hospitals. She gave food to the people on the streets. So I want us to think, what's a kind thing that we could do right now? Okay? So you guys can either draw this, you can write it, you can video it. Any way to share with me a kind thing that you can do. Have fun with your writing.